Today on CityCast Nashville, Mayor Freddie O'Connell has launched Nashville's first ever Office of Youth Safety. This initiative will focus on addressing youth conflict, preventing gun violence, promoting restorative justice, and building safer communities across the city. One of the major supporters and driving forces behind this initiative is Metro Councilwoman at Large, Delicia Porterfield. She joins us today to share the vision for this new office, how it came to fruition, the goal of making it operational by summer 2025, and her ongoing commitment to supporting Nashville's youth. It's Wednesday, January 22nd. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. In June of last year, Metro Council approved funding for what you described as the nation's first Office of Youth Safety. What inspired the creation of this, and what role did Nashville's youth play in shaping it?
When I was working on the budget, SMC, Southern Movement Committee, reached out to me, and that was their executive director, Erica Perry, Jamel Campbell-Gooch, and Mike Floss. So that's the leadership team with SMC. And they reached out to discuss a proposal with me. So I scheduled a meeting. And once I heard about it, I just absolutely fell in love with it. Basically, they have a youth assembly, and their youth have been coming together. They were talking to them about things that was happening in the community. The youth were sharing their concerns about what was happening. And this is a solution that they came up with. They wanted to do an Office of Youth Safety through our city government to address gun violence outside of police and courts, or cops in cages, as we like to say. Mm-hmm. They also wanted restorative justice practices in our community centers, as well as increased restorative justice practices in our school system. Many times, like, students may have like an altercation at school, mm-hmm. and that may run over into the community center after school, or this is what the students were saying. You know, sometimes it runs over into the community centers after school. So they wanted to make sure that they had a safe way to resolve those issues after school. So they came up with the idea to invest $10 million in our youth through this proposal. So when I met with them, I loved the idea. I was really transparent that we would not be able to do $10 million, but I was committed to the idea and committed to doing everything I could to get this across the finish line. So that's really what inspired it and what started the development of the Office of Youth Safety.
And the background from some of these SMC folks, they worked with Gideon's Army and the Black Nashville Assembly. Is that correct?
I know Jamel did work for Gideon's Army, and Black Nashville Assembly is a subsidiary of SMC.
So they've been working in that space for a long time. So
yes, they've been working. All of them have collectively been working in that space for a long time. They also organize youth. They work with the youth. Yeah. So they, you know, this is like an ongoing thing. Like, it wasn't like the youth just came together for this one thing and said, hey, we want to do this. Like, they have been organizing the youth and working with them like over time. And this is what came out of, like, this is something tangible that came out of the organizing that they have been doing with our youth in the community.
And what personal experience or stories have shaped your passion for youth safety and this initiative?
So I used to be a teacher before I was on council. I worked in Metro Nashville public school system. I worked in Williamson County. So I was actually in our public schools for almost 10 years before I resigned, retired from education to help kids in a different way, in a different path. And I know, you know, firsthand what it means to kids when we help support them. Like, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that behavior is something that has to be taught. And many times, like, we have this like expectation, like, oh, a child should know better. Like, they should know not to do that. They should know better. If your parents can't teach you conflict resolution skills, if all you have seen is a certain type of behavior, then you don't necessarily know that there's like a better way, or that this isn't the typical way to address issues. I also have just very, you know, personal experiences as well, as far as friends and family members. And, you know, I have one of my friends, 2 of her children have been shot at this point. Just recently, my daughter's cousin was killed maybe a month or 2 ago here in Nashville. So, I mean, the issue of youth safety is something that is very real and personal. Like, this isn't, you know, this political thing. This is people's lives, and violence impacts all of us in different ways, but it's an epidemic that is impacting us all. And this was just a beautiful way to address it and to create something that we haven't seen before.
So what's your vision for the Office of Youth Safety? How is it going to work?
Initially, it will be in the mayor's office. Our vision is for it to be a standalone office, but the plan is for it to stand up in the mayor's office. And it is to teach conflict resolution skills to our youth prior to them getting into conflict so that they understand how to resolve issues and understand that they don't have to resort to violence to resolve these issues. And then on the back end, if there is violence that occurs, then the intent is how do we stop the cycle of violence? Because what happens is if someone gets shot, then their friends or family may feel like they need to retaliate and then go against the people or the person who did it. And then the cycle of violence continues. So how do we use restorative justice practices to repair and heal damaged relationships? But even if the relationship cannot be repaired, how do we at least get to a point of understanding that you don't have to continue to perpetuate that cycle? We also have a pilot program with parks. We want to make sure that this is in our community centers, but that is like a heavy lift when you're standing something up off the ground and when you're creating something that doesn't exist. It takes a lot of time and it's a lot of planning that goes into that. So we talked to Director Odom at Parks, and she's been gracious enough to agree to a pilot program, which we're going to be piloting in the Napier community. So when we started talking about what that pilot would look like, we all agreed that Napier was where we wanted to put the first investment. So that will be a lot of like wraparound services and resources for our kids. Something that we hear from the youth a lot is that, a lot of kids feel like they don't have anything that they can do. Like there's not a lot of, people call them like third spaces. There's not really a lot of places that kids can go. It used to be, you can go to the mall after school, but now you go to the mall and you have to have a parent there with you. There are not a lot of spaces that are just open and welcoming to our youth, but community centers are still a place that's like open and welcoming. So we want to make sure that the staff is equipped and that they are trained with trauma-informed care, that they have the resources that are available to them to help provide resources to our youth to give them the skills that they need to address these conflicts.
Can you expound on third spaces? I fear some of our listeners may not be familiar with them, but it seems as though like a lack of having these third spaces plays a major role in this need for the Office of Youth Safety.
Yeah, so basically third spaces are, if you think about home and work, those are like your two, as an adult, those are the two primary spaces that we reside in. But for a child, their two primary spaces are home and school. So outside of home and school, what is that third space? And those might be like parks or libraries or gyms or movie theaters or churches or coffee shops. Like as an adult, we can freely go to any of those spaces and no one's going to like blink an eye. But as a child, where can you go? Many people feel like, oh, we shouldn't have to babysit. But the reality is we live in a place that is becoming increasingly less affordable. So many parents are working 2 and 3 jobs to make the ends meet and to be able to pay for a roof over their children's head, to be able to pay the bills, to be able to provide food. So parents aren't always available. And I believe that the vast majority of our parents do the best that they can to provide support for their children. But if you're working second shift, if you work from 2 to 11 and your kid gets out of school at 3 o'clock, who's going to watch your child? And many people can't afford childcare anymore. Like childcare is no longer affordable to people. So you have to rely on like after school programs. Some people can't afford after school programs. After school programs fill up very quickly. I'm in a mom's group on Facebook and someone posted yesterday, here's your yearly reminder to go ahead and start signing up for summer programs
already
because they fill up. So it's just not enough safe spaces for our youth to go. So we wanted to make sure that we get buy-in from the youth so that we could provide things that they actually want to do to make it more enticing for them to join, participate, and show up.
Yeah, I hung out at Nipper's Corner a lot when I was younger. And, I occasionally go to the Green Hills Mall. It's not my favorite mall anymore, but I see youth trying to gather there, but they kind of rush to clear away youth at the Green Hills Mall. I don't know if you've noticed that, but that's unfortunate because where are the children supposed to go?
Absolutely. And where can they go and be safe? Like if that's a place where they do feel safe, where it's less likely to have violence, then, I think sometimes as adults, like we think about our experience and we don't remember what it's like to be kids. So, adults will look at the kids like, oh, they're loud, or, kids can literally just be existing and walking around and laughing. And people are just like, oh my God, they're misbehaving. And it's like, no, they're just laughing, like they're just children. Experiencing joy, right? They're being teenagers. So just really wanted to make sure that we provide that safe space for them.
All right, we have to talk about the budget since you're Metro Council at Large Chair of the Budget and Finance Committee. We managed to get $1 million from the city's spending plan for this new initiative. But more than $88 million is allocated just this year to the new Juvenile Justice Center. Why is so little of our city's budget dedicated to prevention?
That is a really great question. And that is a hard question for me to answer, but I will answer it as best as I can. The juvenile justice, and let me start off by saying this. I am going to answer your question. I am not saying that I agree with or disagree with the way that it is run, but I am answering your particular question. So when you look at the juvenile justice facility, a lot of the work that they plan to do, and part of why it is so expensive, is because they do want to do so much of the preventative work. I will take Sheriff Hall for an example. Lots of people feel lots of ways about incarceration, myself included. I feel very strongly against for-profit prison. I mean, there are so many things that I'm against. And I think a lot of times, like, we are very limited in what we actually know. So we make a lot of assumptions, myself included. So I had an assumption about the way that Sheriff Hall, well, not necessarily Sheriff Hall, but just I had an assumption about the way that, prison works. And I had a really great meeting with Sheriff Hall. And when I learned about, all of the programs that he offers and how he has a really great rate of like a really low recidivism rate with people reoffending after they've been released, and just all of these like preventative programs that he has to offer support so people don't re-enter into the program. I think that's amazing. And my question is like, why can't we offer that on the front end so that people are not getting involved in these situations? So I think that there are, when we look at things like social services and MAC, and we have like various entities in which we are trying to provide services that are like wraparound services, whether that is, utility assistance, food assistance, whether that is mental health support or connecting people with services that they need. I think we do try to fund, different programs and different initiatives. But we also have a good portion of people in our city who believes that the city budget should not be used for those things. We have people that tell us frequently that they don't believe that money should go to nonprofits to help support this type of work, or that money should not be used in these ways. So I think it's definitely a difference in just a belief system and a difference in values and how people believe that things like this should be addressed. Like we have a good portion of people who believe that the way to get to these things is through more policing and more oversight, and, the need for more surveillance technology and things of that nature. We're always balancing, if that makes sense, like what we're hearing from the community, what people believe is the right way, what we ourselves believe is the right way, and trying to create programs or create policies or create things that don't exist to try to meet the needs that the residents have. I can't run the city's checkbook the way that I would run my personal checkbook, because if that's the case, it would be, the investments would look a lot differently. But I do have to make sure that I'm balancing, my moral compass, my belief system with what I believe is in the best interest of the city, what we're hearing from residents, and also, frankly, what we can get the majority of the council members to vote on and support. So that's also a piece of it.
Well, speaking of the balance between policing and prevention, I want to connect this to something that's happening in the news right now. East Nashville saw a recent string of car break-ins, and the police have arrested some teenage suspects for that. In a perfect world, how could this office have prevented this entire chain of events?
Oh, that is a great question. I want to say, in a perfect world, is such a great way to phrase that, because I don't know that there's any one thing that could be done that will completely prevent crime from happening. And I think that it's a really heavy lift if we try to have the expectation that the Office of Youth Safety will be all things, because it won't be all things. We're primarily focused on gun violence. So, ideally, students who will become involved with the Office of Youth Safety will get great resources. In a perfect world, maybe these youth were involved with their community center, and maybe they got a mentor through the community center. Maybe they had a positive thing to do after school and learned, alternative ways. Maybe they got some workforce development skills and they were able to acquire a job that would actually pay, a living wage and pay some good money, and they would not have made those choices or those decisions. But, we can't say that. Like, once the office is off the ground, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I don't see this eradicating all crime or eradicating all youth crime or all gun violence, but we do want to significantly reduce it by giving youth alternatives and better ways to handle and address conflicts. I also want to say something else too, because I'm so glad that you asked that, because this is something that's like really near and dear to me. Like, when we talk about the Office of Youth Safety, I mentioned that I met with SMC at the beginning of the budget cycle. We've been meeting probably on a weekly basis since the budget has passed, with the leaders of SMC and with Juvenile Court Clerk Lionel Matthews. He's a part of our team as well. When I say this is a labor of love, like we are putting our all into this. And one thing that's really important to me is that we don't see this office as like we don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. This is not, like, youth safety is also like walking to school and making sure that there are sidewalks and making sure that kids can walk to school without getting hit by a car. That's also youth safety, but that's not the angle that we're coming from. Like, we are looking at addressing gun violence with our youth and making sure that our youth are safe. What we anticipate and what we believe is going to happen is that we're going to see a significant reduction in gun violence.
And so the first step is hiring this executive director. Can you give us an update on the hiring process and the qualities you're looking for in this candidate?
Yes. One thing that I think is really important is you have to have someone who is knowledgeable about this type of work and someone who has the credibility to work within the community, but also has the savviness to be able to operate within the government. So, you have to have that balance, because if you have someone, they can have all the street cred, they can work with the kids, they can do all those things. But if they can't present a proposal on a budget, then the office isn't going to be successful. Like, if they can't navigate the systems of government and working with other departments, then it just won't be successful. And if they are completely within the confines of knowing how to operate within the government, but they can't relate to people in the community, it won't be successful. So, it's really important for us that we have someone that kind of, can live in both spaces and that can be, respected in both spaces, that can work with people in both spaces, someone that can really, relate to the youth, someone that is a visionary who sees the vision that has been laid out, that can not only run with their vision, but build on it and implement it going forward. So it does take time to get it off of the ground, but we are wanting this office to be up and running prior to the summer. We do know that there's always an uptick in youth violence when the summer hits, because again, kids aren't in school, so they don't have a safe space to be throughout the day. And, one of the results of that is you see an uptick in youth violence. So we do hope to have this up and running by that time.
All right, I could continue talking to you all day, but we have one last question. What message do you have for young people in Nashville who may be feeling disillusioned or unsafe in their communities?
My message would be that it's okay and you're not alone. Like, it's okay to feel scared sometimes. there is something that you can do about it. You know, there are people that care about you. There are people that don't know you, that have never met you before, but that love you and they care about you and they care enough to want to invest in you and to want to make sure that you have an opportunity for a better and safer life. So we are doing what we can do to try to create this. And you can also be a part of that. SMC has a youth internship, a paid youth internship opportunity where kids and our youth can actively participate in being a part of their like youth assemblies and giving their feedback and sharing their thoughts and sharing their fears and helping to create something better. Those closest to the problem are typically those with the solution to address the problem. And if you're afraid, you know, we want to hear from you and we want to hear what those fears are and what can we do better to help address this. And then the second part of that message would be that in this beautiful world, like we can really create the world that we want to live in. And that is what I see for like my role on council. And that's what I see with this Office of Youth Safety. And so many times, like we as a community, and we as people, especially us as adults, we always come out about what we hate and what we're against and what we don't want. But it is not often that we come out and say what we're for and what we support and what we want to see. And this is just a beautiful example of how we can work together. You have a nonprofit and you have government working together, and a beautiful example of co-governance to build and create something that doesn't exist and to build the world that we want to live in. So my message to our youth that don't feel safe is that you have the power to create what doesn't exist. And if you don't feel safe, you can create a community in which you do feel safe. And it may sound like a lot as a child and it may sound overwhelming, but that's why we connect and we create and we join communities and we create a community. Like you start there with creating a community and find other like-minded people that want to create the same thing that you want to create. And from there, the opportunities are endless.
Alicia, thank you so much. You've given us all so much hope going into this year.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you all for the opportunity to just be able to talk about the office.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friends? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles.